Let's take a look at the IEP form labeled WK-300, the excusal form. This form is very similar to the state form, only its main difference is that it's electronic. So you can fill it out, store it, and send it all within WebKids. So if you look here at the form, just like all of our forms, any box that's yellow is not going to print, but it does give information as reminders and prompts for the providers. So as you fill it out, it's got some key reminders for you to consider. So this one specifically talks about the IEP and being able to present this form and have it signed prior to starting the IEP meeting. One person's required to fill the role of each required member for the duration of the meeting, and a reminder that the special education provider, that can mean your SPED teacher. It can also be another provider of special ed services like an SLP, OT, PT, social worker, whatever. So an excusal form is not required by KSDE for every teacher or provider of the student. Only one of them is required to fill that role. So whether that's the special education teacher, the general education teacher, you just have to have one fulfilling that role for the entire duration of the meeting. Now, your agency may require you to do things differently, but we go by the KSDE regulations and so in their guidelines. So we're going to go with that for the demonstration of this form. Remember, when you go to print this form, this is not going to show up. So as we come down here, it's going to automatically fill in the student's name for you and the IEP date. You are able to check, in this case, on the demographics page, this student only has contact number 1 filled in. And so we're going to make that available for contact number 1. And then this information here is not any different than any of the information that is on the form provided by KSDE. So this provides that information to the parent or the LEADM that is associated with using this form. If you come down here, the first spot that you are able to make an edit to, change, or fill in is going to be this drop-down menu here. Now, on previous versions of this form, we did have it available, but you were not able to type it in or make a selection. You had to print the form and then handwrite it in. So this has been created for you to make it the ease of use just that much better. So one thing to point out is that, like I said, KSDE requires that you indicate which position is not going to be fulfilled for the duration of the IEP meeting. This is confusing to some people because they are thinking which person, and we're considering the position. So it's not necessarily that Mrs. Jones can't come. If she's the general education teacher, then we need to indicate that the general education teacher role will not be fulfilled for that entire meeting. So the state doesn't care that it's Mrs. Jones. Your agency might, but you have the option to select general ed, whether the person is a special ed provider. These are the required roles. Okay, so you have the ability now to make that selection. One of the things that people get confused on is they'll type it in here and say, okay, Mrs. Jones was the general education teacher. And then once they click save, we hear a lot of, it didn't save or WebKids deleted the information I put in. Well, you're right, it doesn't save because you already have the general education teacher. So if you look a little bit closer where it says other, specify below, this is the only time that you're able to use that right here and have it saved. So if I put Mrs. Jones and I click save, that is going to save. So you just have to remember it's specific to the position. If you really want to get specific, you could put Mrs. Jones, general education teacher, and you could save that. But again, that's not required. So we are, for this demonstration, going to put down, let's say that the general education teacher was not present. And we're going to come down here, and this is pretty self-explanatory, complete only one column. So you need to make the choice of whether or not you're going to excuse a position from the area of the curriculum or related service that is not being modified or discussed, or maybe it's because the area or curriculum of service might be modified or discussed. In most cases, I always recommend people use the might be, because you never know where an IEP meeting will take you. You may consider and plan for one conversation, and if you've been in IEPs, it can end up in a whole different situation. So make that determination Remember, you have to complete this form prior to beginning the IEP meeting and get that LEADM or parent consent to continue forward without this position being present. So there are two options under each. They're both identical. Non-attendance means that the member of the team is not going to attend, and that the school and the team, or excuse me, the parent or the legal education decision maker, they agree that the attendance is not necessary. Okay, when you come over here to this side, it says non-attendance. It says they're excused from the meeting, but it also indicates that they're going to provide written input related to the development of that IEP to both the legal education decision maker or parent and to the other members of the IEP team meeting. So if there's a possibility that that might be discussed, or that, let's say the speech teacher can't make it, but the general education teacher is going to talk about that area because it's being discussed, then you would check over here. Okay, so you have to make that determination, and it requires some planning ahead. Partial attendance is exactly what it talks about. It's the person is going to be there, excuse me, not even the person, but maybe the position is not going to be there for the duration of the whole meeting. Okay, so this one is saying that the person will attend a portion of the meeting, and we're discussing, and it gives you a box here to type it in. This one says that person will attend to the portion, same thing over here. Okay, so just remember the position has to be there for the duration of the entire meeting. So if you're having an IEP meeting and the science teacher has to leave, but then the English teacher is going to come in instead, and then the reading teacher is going to come in, that is okay and does not require an excusal because the general education teacher position is being fulfilled for the entire duration of that IEP meeting. So you have to just be mindful of what it is that you are wanting to indicate to the parent and get their consent to continue forward. So on this side, you'll see it has I agree or disagree. And if you choose this side, it's a consent or do not consent. Okay, you wouldn't want to check both sides. You're choosing one or the other. Some people say, well, what about if I have two people who can't be here? If it fulfills different roles, you'll need to use a different form for the different position. So if you look down here, we have electronic signatures. If that parent or somebody is sitting right there at that IEP meeting and you want to scoot this computer, if it's got a trackpad or a phone or an iPad or anything with something that you can sign, you can give that to the parent to sign right there in front of you. They can click save, and now you've got consent. The system will date and timestamp it for you. If they forget to put the date over here of 7/10/23, that's okay, because like I said, right here, it's already saved. Okay, if there are two parents in the meeting, number 2, I'm terrible at this, click save. It will also date and timestamp that as well. So a lot of people are leery of using the forms because they say, well, we are not actually using electronic signatures at this time, so we don't want it. If you're not using electronic signatures, that is okay. You'll notice I cleared those out so I can show you what this looks like. If you're not using electronic signatures, you can still display to print the form, and those boxes will go away, and you can still print the form like you've always done. So just because you aren't using electronic signatures doesn't mean that this form is not available for your use. You can see how it prints just like it would print any other time. So that is the WK-300 consent to excuse required IEP team member from the meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and email us. It's either Amber or Brian at webkids.org. Thank you.